My name is Sarah, 34 years old, and until last month I was living what I thought was the American dream: a beautiful house in suburbia, a successful career as a financial advisor, and 8 wonderful years married to Jake. Or so I believed. My birthday dinner at Le Chateau was supposed to be a celebration. Instead, it became the night my sister Natalie destroyed my world with just 2 sentences, and the night I finally fought back. Before I tell you about the worst moment of my life, let me know where you are watching from in the comments. Hit that like button if you have ever been betrayed by someone you thought you could trust with your life. I always thought I had it all figured out. A corner office at Preston Financial with my name on the door, a stunning 4-bedroom colonial in Westlake with a garden I lovingly tended every weekend, and most importantly, Jake Wilson, the man who had been my rock for over a decade. We met at the university library during my senior year. I was buried in finance textbooks, and he was finishing his MBA. Jake asked to borrow my economics notes, but I knew it was just an excuse to talk to me. His warm brown eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled, and I was instantly drawn to his quiet confidence. Our first date was at a tiny coffee shop just off campus, where we talked until the owner politely asked us to leave at closing time. After dating for 3 years, Jake proposed during a weekend trip to Napa Valley. The wedding was everything I had dreamed of since I was a little girl. 150 guests at the Rosewood Garden, my father walking me down the aisle with tears in his eyes, and Jake waiting at the altar looking at me like I was the only woman in the world. The first 8 years of our marriage were blissful. We travelled to Europe twice, bought our dream house, and built successful careers. Jake started his own investment firm that grew impressively each year. I became the youngest senior advisor at my company. We were the couple our friends envied, always holding hands, sharing private jokes, finishing each other's sentences. There was just one shadow over our perfect life. After 5 years of marriage, we decided we were ready for children. We bought a 4-bedroom house specifically to fill it, with the sounds of little feet running down the hallway. But month after month, my period arrived with devastating regularity. After 2 years of trying, we consulted fertility specialists. The diagnosis came as a crushing blow. I had severe endometriosis that had gone undetected for years, causing irreversible damage. The chances of me conceiving naturally were virtually non-existent. Jake held me as I cried for weeks. He assured me that I was enough, that we could look into adoption or surrogacy in the future, but for now, we had each other. I eventually made peace with our child, free future, grateful for the wonderful husband who stood by my side through such a difficult time. If my marriage was my greatest joy, my relationship with my sister Natalie was my greatest challenge. 4 years younger than me, Natalie always seemed to be living in my shadow, at least according to her. Where I was studious and responsible, Natalie was impulsive and carefree. I graduated as valedictorian. Natalie barely finished high school. I saved for college. Natalie expected our parents to pay for everything. Our parents unintentionally widened the rift between us. They constantly held me up as the example Natalie should follow. Sarah got straight A's. Why can't you study like Sarah? Sarah has a good job. Why can't you find a stable career like your sister? The comparisons bred resentment that festered over the years. As teenagers, Natalie developed a disturbing habit of going after any boy who showed interest in me. My junior prom date mysteriously ended up making out with Natalie at an after party. My college boyfriend received flirty texts from her until I discovered them. It became such a pattern that I stopped introducing boyfriends to my family until I was sure of the relationship. When I met Jake, I kept him away from Natalie for 6 months. When they finally met at our engagement party, I watched Natalie like a hawk. She was on her best behaviour that night, but I caught the evaluating look in her eyes as she sized up my fiancé. To Jake's credit, he never gave Natalie the slightest encouragement. He was unfailingly polite, but kept a respectful distance. After our wedding, we saw my family at holidays and occasional dinners, but Jake always made excuses when Natalie suggested hanging out just the two of them. 2 years ago, after our parents' retirement party, I decided it was time to heal the rift with my sister. We were both adults with our own lives. Surely we could move beyond childhood jealousies. I invited Natalie for lunch, and we had our first honest conversation in years. She admitted her resentment, and I acknowledged how difficult it must have been growing up being constantly compared to me. Jake encouraged this reconciliation. He said family was too important to let old grudges keep us apart. He even offered to help, suggesting the three of us spend more time together. I was touched by his desire to improve my relationship with Natalie. Little did I know what was really happening behind my back. Over the next year, Jake became the mediator between Natalie and me. When we had disagreements, he smoothed things over. He remembered her birthday when I almost forgot. He suggested inviting her to dinner at least twice a month. During these family gatherings, I noticed Jake and Natalie often ended up deep in conversation. He would listen intently as she talked about her latest job or boyfriend troubles. I was grateful for his patience with my sometimes difficult sister. I thought he was being the supportive husband I had always known. Looking back now, I can see all the signs I chose to ignore. The changes in Jake's behavior were subtle at first, so subtle that I questioned whether I was imagining things. After 8 years of marriage, you develop a sixth sense about your partner. You know their routines, their habits, the rhythm of their days. When that rhythm changes, you notice even if you can't immediately identify what's different. About 6 months ago, Jake started taking phone calls in another room. This was new. We had always been comfortable having conversations in front of each other. Nothing to hide, we used to say. Now he would glance at his phone, mumble something about work, and step onto the back porch or into his home office. His phone developed a new feature too: password protection. For 8 years, our phones had been open books to each other, not because we snooped, but because we had nothing to hide. Then suddenly, Jake was angling his screen away from me when texting, and I noticed the new lock screen that hadn't been there before. I told myself it was work-related. Jake was handling sensitive financial information for clients. It made sense he would need more privacy. I trusted him completely, so I pushed away the tiny voice of doubt. Then came the late nights at the office and sudden business trips. Jake had always worked hard, but he had been consistent about coming home for dinner by 7. Now, 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock would pass, and he would text that he was still wrapping things up. The business trips were especially unusual. In all our years together, Jake rarely travelled overnight for work. Now, he was flying to Chicago, Boston, even San Francisco for client meetings that apparently couldn't be handled by video call. I might have continued believing the work excuse if I hadn't found the restaurant receipt. I was doing laundry and emptying his suit pockets when I found a folded piece of paper. La Maison Rouge, one of the most expensive restaurants in town. The date was a Tuesday when Jake had told me he was working late. The bill was for 2 people, $370, including a bottle of champagne I knew I hadn't shared with him. My hands shook as I stared at that piece of paper. There could be explanations, I told myself. A client dinner he forgot to mention, but Jake had always been meticulous about keeping his business expenses separate, submitting them for reimbursement immediately. And why would he pay for a client dinner with his personal credit card? I tucked the receipt into my jewelry box and said nothing. I wanted to believe there was an innocent explanation. I needed to believe it. 2 weeks later, I found something else. I was looking for a spare phone charger in Jake's desk drawer when I saw a small velvet box pushed to the back. My heart actually lifted for a moment. Was he planning a surprise gift for me? Perhaps for our upcoming anniversary. I opened it and found a delicate diamond bracelet far more expensive than anything Jake had given me before. My momentary joy curdled into suspicion when I saw the gift receipt dated just 3 days earlier. Our anniversary was months away. My birthday was approaching, but Jake had already told me about the dinner he was planning. I carefully returned the bracelet to its hiding place, feeling sick to my stomach. That night, I barely slept, watching Jake breathing peacefully beside me and wondering who the bracelet was for. As my suspicions grew, I started noticing changes in Natalie's behaviour too. My once difficult and distant sister was suddenly eager to spend time with me. She called several times a week just to chat. She suggested shopping trips and lunch dates. On the surface, this should have been the relationship breakthrough I had wanted for years. Instead, it felt artificial, as if she was overcompensating. Most concerning was how often Natalie found reasons to stop by our house, especially when she knew Jake would be home. She would bring cookies she had baked, ask Jake for advice on her car that was making a strange noise, or want his opinion on her investment options. Once, she even showed up at 9:30 in the evening with a bottle of wine, claiming she had a rough day and needed to talk. Jake invited her to stay, and I sat through an hour of my sister monopolizing my husband's attention. I caught the looks they exchanged when they thought I wasn't watching, the way Jake's hand lingered on Natalie's shoulder when greeting her, how they sometimes seemed to be sharing private jokes I wasn't part of. Once I came back from the bathroom to find them standing unusually close in the kitchen, jumping apart when I entered. When I casually mentioned these observations to Jake, he had a ready explanation. Natalie was going through a rough patch. She had confided in him about her struggle with depression after her last breakup. He was trying to be supportive, especially since he knew how important rebuilding our relationship was to me. The bracelet. That was actually for his mother's upcoming 70th birthday. I wanted to believe him. I needed to believe him. After all, this was Jake, the man who had held me through countless nights of tears when we learned I couldn't have children. The man who remembered to bring me sunflowers, my favourite, every Friday. The man who still left love notes in my lunch bag like we were still college sweethearts. So I pushed my suspicions aside and focused on the upcoming birthday celebration Jake was planning. Surely my imagination was getting the better of me. Surely the man I had loved for a decade wasn't betraying me with my own sister. How desperately I wanted to be wrong. As my 34th birthday approached, Jake became increasingly enthusiastic about planning a celebration. He suggested a private room at Le Chateau, the most exclusive restaurant in the city, where reservations typically required booking months in advance. I was initially surprised. Our birthdays had always been intimate affairs, usually a quiet dinner, just the two of us maybe, with a small gathering of close friends on the weekend. This sudden desire for a lavish party seemed out of character. Jake insisted that my 34th deserved special recognition. "You work so hard, Sarah. You deserve to be celebrated properly, with everyone who loves you there to honour you," he told me one evening as we sat on the deck of our home. The determination in his eyes was so intense that I felt a flutter of unease. It felt as though he was trying too hard, compensating for something, but I smiled and thanked him, pushing away my doubts once again. The guest list grew quickly. My parents and Natalie, of course. My closest friends from college and work, Jake's business partners and our couple friends from the neighbourhood. Even my favourite cousin was flying in from Seattle. All told, about 30 people would be gathering to celebrate me. Jake handled all the arrangements, insisting I shouldn't have to plan my own party. He coordinated with the restaurant, arranged for a custom cake from the artisanal bakery I loved, and even hired a photographer to capture the evening. His attention to detail was both touching and slightly overwhelming. Natalie inserted herself into the planning process almost immediately. When Jake mentioned the party preparations during a Sunday dinner at our parents' home, Natalie practically leapt from her seat. "Oh, let me help," she exclaimed. "I know exactly what Sarah would love. I can help with decorations or the music selection or whatever you need." Before I could politely decline, Jake smiled warmly at my sister. That would be great, Natalie. I could use the help. Why don't you come by the house tomorrow evening and we can go over some ideas? I watched this exchange with growing discomfort. Jake had never needed help planning things before. He was methodical and organised, traits that had served him well in building his business. And yet here he was, eagerly accepting Natalie's assistance for what was essentially just a dinner reservation and a cake order. Over the next 2 weeks, Natalie was at our house almost every other evening, huddled with Jake over sample menus, music playlists, and seating arrangements. Often these planning sessions would continue long after I excused myself to catch up on work or have a bath. I would come downstairs to find them sitting unusually close on the couch, their voices dropping to whispers when I entered the room. One evening, I picked up Jake's phone by mistake when it buzzed on the coffee table. A text message notification from Natalie flashed on the screen. Can't wait to surprise her with our big news. This is going to be the birthday she never forgets. When I mentioned the text to Jake, he smoothly explained that Natalie was helping him arrange for a pianist to play my favourite songs during dinner. He took his phone back with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Just wait and see, he said. This will be a night to remember. 3 days before the party, I came home early from work with a migraine to find Jake's car and Natalie's compact sedan in our driveway. I entered quietly through the side door, not wanting to announce my presence in case they were finalizing some birthday surprise. What I overheard from the kitchen made my blood run cold. Do you think she suspects anything? Natalie's voice was hushed but excited. No, Jake replied firmly. Sarah trusts me completely. She has no idea what's coming. Their laughter mingled together in a way that made my stomach twist. I retreated silently and drove around aimlessly for an hour before returning home pretending I had just arrived. Jake and Natalie were sitting innocently at the kitchen island, a folder of what appeared to be party planning details between them. They greeted me normally, but I noticed Natalie could barely contain her excitement, practically vibrating with secret joy. That night, I lay awake beside Jake, listening to his even breathing and wondering what exactly was going to happen at my birthday dinner. Part of me still clung desperately to the belief that they were planning an extravagant surprise gift. Perhaps the international vacation Jake and I had talked about for years, a weekend at the mountain spa resort I had mentioned wanting to visit, but a growing part of me feared something far worse was coming. The day before my birthday, I discovered a woman's dress in the back of Jake's car, an elegant black cocktail dress with the price tag still attached. Size 4, 2 sizes smaller than I wore. When I confronted Jake about it, he claimed it was a backup gift in case I didn't like his main present. He had bought it for me to encourage me after I mentioned wanting to lose some weight. It was a plausible explanation, but something in his delivery felt rehearsed, and Jake had never once in our marriage commented on my weight or suggested I needed to change anything about my appearance. That same day, I checked our joint bank account and discovered a transfer of $20,000 to Natalie's personal account 2 weeks earlier. When questioned, Jake said he was helping Natalie start a small online business, a secret project they had been discussing for months. He reminded me how important it was to me that he build a better relationship with my sister. I nodded and pretended to accept his explanation, but inside something broke. The weight of all these suspicious incidents became too heavy to ignore. I couldn't continue lying to myself. That afternoon, while Jake was at a meeting and Natalie was supposedly shopping for last-minute party supplies, I made a call to Drake Investigations. I needed to know the truth before I walked into whatever was waiting for me at Le Chateau the next evening. Michael Drake agreed to gather whatever information he could in the 24 hours before my birthday dinner. His fee was steep, but at that moment I would have paid any amount for certainty, even if that certainty shattered my world. What happened next would change my life forever. The day of my 34th birthday began like any other. Jake kissed me, good morning, wished me happy birthday, and brought me coffee in bed. He seemed slightly on edge, but covered it with extra affection, telling me how excited he was for the evening ahead. I went through the motions of my day in a fog of anxiety. The elegant dress I had bought for the occasion hung in my closet like a warning. I had chosen it weeks ago, a deep blue silk that Jake had always said brought out my eyes. Now I wondered if I was dressing up for my own execution. At 4 o'clock, my phone rang with a call from Michael Drake. His voice was carefully professional, but I detected a note of pity that made my stomach clench. "Mrs. Wilson, I have the information you requested. Would you like me to send it electronically, or would you prefer to review it in person?" I chose electronic delivery. I couldn't bear to sit across from a stranger while my marriage disintegrated before my eyes. 5 minutes later, my email notification chimed. I sat at my home office desk, took a deep breath, and opened the file. What I saw confirmed my worst fears and revealed horrors I hadn't even imagined. The first set of photos showed Jake and Natalie at various locations over the past month, entering a hotel together in the middle of the afternoon, having intimate dinners at restaurants across town, walking hand in hand through a park 20 miles away where they thought no one would recognize them. In each image, their body language spoke of lovers, not in-laws. Jake's hand on the small of her back, Natalie leaning into him, looking up with adoration. In one particularly painful shot, they were kissing in Jake's car parked behind a shopping centre I drove past every day to work. The file included screenshots of text messages the investigator had somehow obtained. Reading them felt like acid being poured directly onto my heart. "Jake, I can't wait until we don't have to hide anymore. Just a few more days. Natalie, do you think she's really clueless? Sometimes I catch her looking at us and wonder if she knows. Jake, Sarah trusts me completely. That's her weakness, always has been. Natalie, after the birthday dinner, how long before we can be together officially? Jake, I'll file the papers next week. My lawyer has everything ready. 3 months max, and we'll be free." There were dozens more exchanges, each more devastating than the last. They discussed their future together, laughed about how blind I was, and most horrifically talked about the child they were expecting. That revelation hit me like a physical blow. Natalie was pregnant with Jake's baby. While I had cried in his arms about my inability to conceive, he had been creating a child with my sister. The final documents in the file were financial records showing that Jake had been systematically moving assets out of our joint accounts for months. He had established a separate account with Natalie as a beneficiary. He had taken out a loan against our house without my knowledge, using forged signatures on the paperwork. He had even started the process of selling his share of the business to his partner at a suspiciously low value, presumably to hide assets before filing for divorce. I sat motionless for what felt like hours, the evidence of my husband's betrayal glowing coldly from my computer screen. 8 years of marriage, 13 years together, and it had all been a lie. Or, if not all of it, then enough to poison every happy memory I had cherished. The tears, when they finally came, were silent and endless. I cried for the life I thought I had, for the future that was now destroyed, for the sister who had coveted what was mine since childhood, and finally found a way to take it, and for the innocent child who would be born into this web of betrayal. As the afternoon light faded from my office window, something else replaced my grief. A cold, clear anger that crystallized my thoughts and dried my tears. They had planned to ambush me at my own birthday celebration to announce their relationship and Natalie's pregnancy in front of family and friends, humiliating me at what should have been a moment of joy. They had orchestrated this public execution of my marriage, my dignity, and my place in the family. They expected me to crumble, to fall apart, while they stood strong together, presenting themselves as the future, while I became the past. They had underestimated me severely. I closed my laptop, wiped my face, and began to prepare. My birthday party was now a battleground, and I had no intention of being the casualty. After discovering the full extent of Jake and Natalie's betrayal, I had approximately 5 hours until the birthday dinner, where they planned to publicly humiliate me. Most women might have cancelled the event, called Jake out immediately, or collapsed in grief. But a lifetime of being the responsible, level-headed sister had taught me how to think strategically, even in crisis. I started by calling my personal attorney, Diane Reynolds. Unlike the family lawyer who Jake and I had used for our wills and house purchase, Diane was my connection alone. I had hired her 2 years earlier to help with a complex contract negotiation at work, and we had developed a friendship beyond our professional relationship. Diane, I need emergency help. My husband has been having an affair with my sister, has hidden assets, and plans to announce their relationship and her pregnancy at my birthday dinner tonight. I have evidence of financial fraud, including forged documents. Can you meet me now? To Diane's credit, she cancelled her afternoon appointments and was at my house within the hour. I showed her the investigator's report, and her expression shifted from sympathetic to outraged to determined. Sarah, this is egregious. The infidelity is painful enough, but the financial deception crosses into criminal territory. Those forged documents on the home equity loan, that's fraud. The intentional undervaluing and selling of business assets before divorce, that's dissipation and potentially securities fraud, since his business is registered with the SEC. We can not only secure your financial interests, but Jake could be facing serious legal consequences. Working rapidly, Diane drafted emergency petitions to freeze our assets. She made calls to the family court judge she knew was on duty that evening, explaining the urgency due to the ongoing attempt to hide assets. By 5 o'clock, she had secured an emergency order preventing any further financial transactions from our joint accounts and business interests. This is just the beginning, she assured me. I need more time to build the full case, but this stops the bleeding. Now about tonight. She looked at me with concern. Are you sure you want to go through with this dinner? Absolutely, I replied, my voice steadier than I had expected. I refuse to let them control the narrative. If there's going to be a scene, it will be on my terms. Next, I contacted Jake's business partner, Maxwell Grant. Max and I had always gotten along well, though we weren't particularly close. But I knew him to be a straightforward, ethical businessman who had built the firm with Jake from the ground up. Max, I need to speak with you urgently about some concerning financial activities I've discovered related to the firm. I have reason to believe Jake has been misrepresenting asset values and may have been diverting company funds. We met at a quiet coffee shop where I showed him selected portions of the investigator's report, specifically the financial documentation and text messages referring to the business, but nothing about the personal betrayal. His face darkened as he reviewed the evidence. I suspected something wasn't right with the proposed buyout, Max said, rubbing his forehead. The valuation was well below market, but Jake insisted it was fair, given some supposed problems with our major accounts. He looked up at me sharply. There are no problems with those accounts. In fact, we just secured the Peterson Group, which increases our portfolio value by at least 30%. Are you attending my birthday dinner tonight? I asked. Yes, Jake insisted the whole management team come. Said he had a major announcement. Max's expression shifted to one of realization. This is what he was planning to announce, isn't it? The sale of his portion of the business at a fraudulent valuation. Among other things, I confirmed. I would appreciate it if you could be there with the firm's attorney if possible. While I was meeting with Max, I had the locks changed on our house. An extreme measure, perhaps, but I wasn't taking any chances. I also contacted a digital security expert who helped me change all passwords to our shared accounts backup and secure important documents, and ensure Jake couldn't remotely access my devices. My final call was the most difficult. I contacted my parents, asking to meet them briefly before the dinner. I didn't reveal what I had discovered. I needed to see their reactions in person. I needed to know if they had been part of this conspiracy. Throughout these preparations, Jake texted several times, checking if I was excited about the party, asking what time I would be home to get ready. I responded normally, giving no indication that his world was about to collapse around him. By the time I began dressing for the evening, I had assembled a formidable team. My attorney Jake's business partner and their corporate counsel, the investigators who had gathered the evidence, and even Jake's former wife who had reached out to me after being contacted by my investigator and revealed that Jake had done something similar to her years earlier. I chose my outfit carefully, not the blue dress Jake expected, but a striking red gown I had purchased months ago and kept hidden for a special occasion. Red for strength. Red for the anger burning inside me, red for the new beginning that would rise from these ashes. As I applied my makeup with a steady hand, I looked at myself in the mirror. Behind the carefully applied foundation and mascara, I saw something I hadn't seen in months: determination, clarity, power. Let them have their moment, I thought. Their moment would be brief. Mine would be lasting. I slipped the investigator's report into an elegant clutch purse, took a deep breath, and headed out to face what ever came next. Le Chateau was illuminated like a fairy tale castle as I pulled into the parking lot. Crystal chandeliers glowed warmly through the windows, promising an evening of elegance and celebration. Under different circumstances, I might have been touched by Jake's choice of venue. Now I saw it as just another prop in his elaborate deception. I arrived deliberately early, 20 minutes before the time guests had been instructed to appear. The maitre d' greeted me with a deferential smile. "Mrs. Wilson, happy birthday. Your husband has arranged everything beautifully in the Versailles room. He hasn't arrived yet, but I can show you to the space." "Perfect," I replied, returning his smile with practiced ease. I followed him through the main dining area, nodding at a few familiar faces, to a private room at the back of the restaurant. The space was stunning, I had to admit. Round tables draped in ivory linen surrounded a small dance floor. Each centerpiece featured white roses and blue hydrangeas, my favorite flowers. A table for gifts stood near the entrance, already holding several elegantly wrapped packages. A 3-tiered cake waited on a separate table, decorated with delicate sugar flowers that matched the centerpieces. Jake had spared no expense for this performance. I wondered briefly if he saw the irony in creating such a beautiful setting for such an ugly revelation. I requested a brief moment alone in the room, which the maitre d' graciously granted. Once by myself, I checked that the small recording devices my investigator had helped me place earlier that day were still in position. One beneath the head table where Jake, Natalie, and I would be seated. Another near the cake table where announcements would likely be made. The recordings would have no legal standing, but they would ensure that no one could later claim I had misrepresented what happened. Diane arrived next, elegant in a black pantsuit that projected professional authority even in this social setting. She squeezed my hand reassuringly. "Are you absolutely certain about this approach, Sarah? We could handle this privately with just the legal team. I appreciate your concern, but this is exactly what they planned for me. A public humiliation disguised as a celebration. They don't get to rewrite this story." I fixed my gaze on hers. "I need to reclaim my dignity, Diane. This is the only way." She nodded, understanding in her eyes. "Very well. Maxwell and Charles are in the lobby. The investigator is stationed at the bar with a clear view of this room. Your parents just pulled up. Are you ready for that conversation?" "As ready as I'll ever be," I said, smoothing my dress and squaring my shoulders. My parents entered the room, looking happy and festive. My mother kissed my cheek, complimenting my dress. My father hugged me tightly, telling me how proud he was of his little girl. Their warmth made what I had to do even more painful. "Mum, Dad, I need to speak with you privately for a moment," I said, leading them to a quiet corner. Their expressions turned concerned at my serious tone. "Is everything all right, sweetheart?" my mother asked. "You look beautiful, but something seems wrong." I looked directly into their eyes as I spoke. I need to ask you something important, and I need the absolute truth. Did you know that Jake and Natalie have been having an affair, that she is pregnant with his child, that they planned to announce this tonight at my birthday party? The colour drained from both their faces. My father stumbled back slightly, gripping the back of a chair for support. My mother's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with shock. "Sarah, what are you saying? That's impossible," my father sputtered. "Jake would never, Natalie couldn't possibly." Their reaction told me everything I needed to know. They hadn't been part of the conspiracy. Their shock and horror were too genuine to be fabricated. "I have proof," I said more gently. "Photographs, text messages, financial records showing Jake has been moving money to accounts with Natalie's name. They've been planning this for months." My mother began to cry silently, reaching for my hand. "Oh, Sarah, I had no idea. How could they do this to you? To our family?" My father's shock was quickly replaced by fury. "I'll kill him. I'll absolutely destroy him," he growled, his hands clenching into fists. "No, Dad." I placed a restraining hand on his arm. "I will handle this my way. I need you both to trust me and follow my lead tonight. Can you do that?" They looked at each other, then back at me, nodding slowly. Whatever had happened to the little girl they had raised who needed their protection, in her place stood a woman who was taking control of her own life even in its darkest moment. The room began to fill with guests. Friends from work arrived in groups, exclaiming over the beautiful decorations. Neighbourhood couples we had shared barbecues with for years greeted me warmly. Jake's business associates mingled near the bar that had been set up in one corner. I circulated among them, accepting birthday wishes with gracious smiles, making small talk about the weather and recent local events. No one seemed to detect the storm brewing beneath my calm exterior. I was performing the role of celebrated birthday girl flawlessly, all while watching the door for the two people who thought they were about to become the main characters in this drama. At precisely 7:00, Jake and Natalie arrived together. They had obviously coordinated their entrance as well as their attire. Jake wore a charcoal suit with a blue tie that matched Natalie's dress perfectly. The dress, I noted with a flash of anger, was the exact one I had found in Jake's car. They paused in the doorway, surveying the room with the satisfied expressions of directors watching their production come to life. Jake spotted me across the room and made his way over Natalie, following slightly behind. He kissed my cheek, his hand lingering on my waist in a show of husbandly affection that now made my skin crawl. "Happy birthday, sweetheart. You look incredible. Red. I thought you were wearing the blue dress we talked about." "I felt like a change," I replied smoothly. "Life is full of surprises, isn't it?" Something flickered in his eyes. Uncertainty, perhaps, but it was quickly replaced by the confident mask he had worn for months. Natalie hugged me, next to the scent of her expensive perfume enveloping me. I allowed the embrace, but did not return it. "Happy birthday, big sis," she gushed, her excitement barely contained. "This is going to be a night you'll never forget." The audacity of her statement nearly broke my composure, but I maintained my smile. "I'm counting on it, Natalie." Dinner proceeded according to Jake's carefully orchestrated plan. We were seated at the head table, Jake to my right, Natalie to my left, my parents across from us, looking uncomfortable but following my request to act normally. Wine was poured, appetizers served. Conversation flowed around the room. I picked at my food, taking small sips of water instead of the champagne Jake kept trying to press upon me. I needed complete clarity for what was coming. Throughout the meal, I noticed Jake and Natalie exchanging glances, subtle nods, their anticipation building visibly. My parents watched them with new awareness, my father's jaw clenching each time Jake casually touched Natalie's arm while reaching for the bread basket or passing the salt. As the main course plates were being cleared, Jake tapped his glass with a spoon, calling for attention. The room quieted, all eyes turning to our table. This was it, the moment they had been planning for months. Jake stood raising his glass in my direction. First, I want to thank everyone for coming tonight to celebrate my wonderful wife Sarah on her birthday. She has been the most important person in my life for 13 incredible years. The irony of his words made me grip my napkin under the table, but I kept my expression neutral. Around the room, guests smiled indulgently at what they thought was a loving husband's tribute. But tonight isn't just about celebrating another year of Sarah's life. Jake continued, his voice taking on a rehearsed quality I now recognized all too well. It's about new beginnings and exciting changes for our family. He turned to Natalie, extending his hand to help her stand beside him. With a beaming smile, Natalie joined him, practically bouncing with excitement. Natalie has an announcement that will change all our lives, Jake said, his arm sliding around my sister's waist in a gesture that was unmistakably possessive. Natalie took a deep breath, her gaze sweeping the room before landing triumphantly on me. I'm pregnant, 3 months along. The doctors say everything looks perfect. A murmur of confused congratulations rippled through the room. People glanced uncertainly between Natalie and me, trying to understand why this announcement was being made at my birthday dinner. Jake's next words eliminated any confusion. "And I'm the father," he announced proudly. "Natalie and I have fallen deeply in love. We didn't plan for this to happen, but sometimes life gives you unexpected gifts." The room fell into stunned silence. My parents sat frozen, my mother clutching my father's arm as he appeared ready to lunge across the table. My friends and colleagues looked horrified, glancing at me with expressions of shock and pity. "I realise this is sudden," Jake continued into the awkward silence. "But Natalie and I believe in being honest. I will be filing for divorce next week, and once that's finalised, we plan to marry and raise our child together." He turned to me, his expression a carefully constructed mask of regret tinged with resolve. "I never meant to hurt you, Sarah, but you and I both know our marriage has been struggling since we learned you couldn't have children. Natalie and I didn't choose this connection, it chose us." It was perfectly delivered, the speech they had undoubtedly rehearsed for weeks. Jake, the reluctant romantic who had found true love. Natalie, the younger sister who had finally won the prize she had coveted since childhood, and me cast in the role of the barren, inadequate wife who should gracefully exit stage left. Every eye in the room turned to me, waiting for my reaction. Tears, hysterics. A scene that would confirm their narrative of me as the unstable, emotional obstacle to their happiness. Instead, I stood slowly smoothing my red dress and picked up my water glass. The room held its collective breath. "I would like to thank everyone for coming tonight." I began, my voice clear and steady. What was intended as a birthday celebration has indeed turned into something quite different. But not in the way Jake and Natalie expected. I turned to face the two of them, who were now looking at me with growing confusion. This wasn't in their script. "You see," I continued, "I discovered their affair 3 months ago. The secret meetings, the hotel rooms, the lies. I wanted to believe I was mistaken, that the man I had loved for 13 years and the sister I had grown up with couldn't possibly betray me so completely. But as the evidence mounted, I had to face reality. Jake's face had drained of colour. Natalie's triumphant smile had frozen into a grimace. When I realised they were planning to ambush me tonight on my birthday, in front of everyone I care about, I decided they shouldn't be the only ones with a surprise announcement. I gestured toward the door where Diane now stood with Max and the corporate attorney. Beside them, Michael Drake watched the proceedings with professional detachment. "Jake Wilson, I am serving you with papers freezing all our joint assets due to your fraudulent financial activities. The court has already approved this emergency action based on evidence of your attempts to hide assets before filing for divorce." Jake took a step back as though I'd physically struck him. What? What are you talking about? The forged documents for the home equity loan, the deliberate undervaluing of your business shares, the secret accounts you've established with Natalie as beneficiary. I've been documenting everything, Jake. Did you really think I wouldn't notice $20,000 missing from our joint account? Natalie clutched Jake's arm, her confident demeanor crumbling. You said she didn't check the accounts, she whispered loudly enough for those nearby to hear. You promised everything was taken care of. I turned to address the room at large. For those of you who don't know, Jake has been systematically diverting funds from both our personal accounts and potentially his investment firm. His partner, Max Grant, has some questions about that, don't you, Max? Max stepped forward, the corporate attorney at his side. The board has called an emergency meeting for tomorrow morning, Jake. Until then, you're suspended from all company activities and access. We have concerns about significant financial irregularities that may constitute securities fraud. Jake's face had turned ashen. This was spiraling out of his control faster than he could process. You can't do this. The company is as much mine as yours, he protested weakly. Actually, according to your own proposed sale agreement, you were planning to divest most of your ownership at approximately 40% of market value, the attorney pointed out. The board has some questions about why you would propose such an unfavourable arrangement. I watched as the implications of his actions began to dawn on Jake. His carefully constructed escape plan was disintegrating before his eyes. Turning to Natalie, I let my composure slip just enough to show the depth of my hurt and anger. You have wanted what was mine since we were children. My toys, my clothes, my accomplishments. When I couldn't have children, you saw your opportunity to take the one thing I treasured most. Congratulations, Natalie. You finally won, but your prize isn't what you thought. Natalie's smug expression had long since vanished, replaced by growing alarm as she looked at Jake, now being approached by his business partners with grim faces. He told me everything was handled, she said desperately. The money, the house, the business sale. We were going to have enough to start over, to raise our baby in comfort. I almost felt sorry for her, almost. She had been so focused on competing with me, on finally winning, that she hadn't questioned the character of the man she was hitching her future to. The man who betrayed his wife of 8 years would just as easily betray you, Natalie, I said quietly. If not now, then eventually when someone newer, younger, and more convenient comes along, that's who he is. I addressed the stunned gathering one final time. Thank you all for coming tonight. I apologize for the unexpected drama. The dinner is fully paid for, so please stay and enjoy the excellent food. I, however, will be leaving now. As I turned to go, my father stood up, his face flushed with emotion. Jake, you miserable excuse for a man, he growled. You didn't just betray my daughter. You betrayed this entire family. And you... He turned to Natalie, his voice breaking. How could you do this to your own sister? My mother rose, silently, came to my side and took my hand. We will always be here for you, Sarah, she said softly. Whatever you need. I squeezed her hand gratefully, then walked with dignity toward the exit. As I passed Jake, still surrounded by angry business associates, I paused. The divorce papers will be delivered tomorrow, I said evenly. Unlike you, I won't be asking for anything that isn't rightfully mine. I've never needed to take from others to feel whole. With that parting statement, I walked out of Le Chateau, leaving behind the shattered remains of my old life and the two people who had tried and failed to destroy me. The cool night air hit my face as I stepped outside the restaurant, carrying with it the first real breath I had taken in hours. The valet attendant offered to retrieve my car, but I declined, preferring to walk a moment in the garden area adjacent to the parking lot. I needed a moment to process what had just happened, to let the adrenaline subside before driving home. Home. The word felt strange now. The house Jake and I had shared for 7 years was just a structure of wood and stone, no longer the sanctuary I had once believed it to be. Yet it was mine now, secured by the emergency court order Diane had obtained. Jake would not be returning there tonight or any night in the foreseeable future. My phone vibrated in my purse, a series of rapid notifications signaling the aftermath beginning to unfold. I ignored them all. There would be time for damage control, for explanations, for moving forward. Right now, I just needed silence. I sat on a stone bench beneath a flowering magnolia tree, its sweet scent a sharp contrast to the bitterness of the evening. The sound of approaching footsteps made me tense, but it was only Diane, her expression concerned in the soft garden lighting. "That was quite a performance," she said, sitting beside me. "I don't think anyone in that room will forget it." I managed a small smile. Not exactly how I planned to celebrate turning 34. No, I suppose not. She hesitated. "Jake is being escorted from the premises by security. Apparently, he made a scene after you left, trying to access the company's servers remotely from his phone. Max was prepared, thankfully. All access has been revoked." "And Natalie?" I asked, surprised by how little I cared about the answer. "Left in tears with your parents following. Your mother looked devastated is the only word I can think of." I nodded, feeling a twinge of sympathy for my mother. In one night, her family had been torn apart in ways she could never have imagined. My father would be angry for months, perhaps years. My mother would grieve the loss of the daughter she thought she knew. Over the coming weeks, the full extent of Jake's deception unfolded like a complex origami structure being methodically flattened. The forensic accountants Diane hired discovered offshore accounts investments made in Natalie's name with our joint funds, and evidence of tax evasion going back 3 years. His business partners found discrepancies in client accounts that suggested Jake had been siphoning small amounts over time, not enough to raise immediate alarms, but substantial in aggregate. The SEC launched an investigation freezing additional assets and effectively ending Jake's career in financial services. Natalie, faced with the reality that her fairy tale future with Jake had evaporated, retreated to our parents' home. The pregnancy was real, confirmed by medical records subpoenaed during the divorce proceedings. Jake, now facing potential criminal charges and financial ruin, was hardly in a position to provide the comfortable life she had envisioned for herself and their child. My parents struggled to reconcile their love for both daughters with the magnitude of Natalie's betrayal. My father refused to speak to her for weeks. My mother, ever the peacemaker, tried to maintain relationships with both of us, though I made it clear I needed space from any family gatherings that included Natalie. As for me, the divorce was finalized in record time, expedited by Jake's legal troubles and his lawyer's advice to settle quickly and equitably. I retained the house, my retirement accounts, and a fair portion of our joint assets. Jake, facing mounting legal fees and potential restitution payments, didn't contest the arrangement. The emotional recovery took longer than the legal proceedings. For months, I moved through my days in a fog of disbelief and grief. I would catch myself reaching for the phone to tell Jake something about my day, only to remember he was no longer part of my life. I would see sisters shopping together or laughing over coffee and feel a stab of loss for the relationship with Natalie I had always wanted, but never truly had. 6 months after that fateful birthday dinner, I made a decision to seek help. The therapist I found specialized in betrayal trauma and family estrangement. Dr. Levine helped me understand that grief for the life I thought I had was natural and necessary. She guided me through exercises to release anger without letting it consume me, to forgive, not for Jake's or Natalie's benefit, but for my own peace of mind. "It's not about absolving them of responsibility," she explained during one particularly difficult session. "It's about freeing yourself from the weight of carrying that betrayal with you everywhere you go." Slowly, I rebuilt my life. I accepted a promotion at work that I had previously declined because Jake thought it would demand too much of my time. I joined a support group for divorced women where I met Jennifer, Rachel, and Alyssa, 3 incredible women who became the sisters of my heart. I travelled to Italy on my own, something Jake had always dismissed as impractical. A year after the divorce, I received a letter from Natalie. She had given birth to a daughter, Emma, and was raising her alone. Jake, now serving 18 months for financial crimes, had shown little interest in being a father. She wrote of her regret, her shame, her hope for eventual forgiveness. I read the letter twice, then filed it away without responding. Perhaps someday I would be ready for that conversation, but not yet. 2 years after my 34th birthday, I celebrated my 36th with a small dinner party at my home. Jennifer, Rachel, and Alyssa were there, along with my parents and a few close colleagues. Also present was Michael, a literature professor I had met in a coffee shop 6 months earlier. He knew my story, had waited patiently while I worked through my hesitation to trust again, and still looked at me like I was the most fascinating person he had ever met. As we gathered around the table, my father raised his glass for a toast. To Sarah, he said, his voice thick with emotion. Who taught us all what real strength looks like? Who reminded us that even in our darkest moments, we have a choice about who we become? I could not be more proud to be your father. I looked around at the faces of those who truly loved me, at the life I had built from the ashes of betrayal, and felt a sense of peace that had been long in coming. The journey had been painful beyond words, but I had emerged stronger, wiser, and more authentically myself than I had ever been in my marriage to Jake. I never wanted revenge. I only wanted justice, and the greatest justice I received wasn't the legal victories or financial settlements. It was this, a life rebuilt on my own terms, filled with genuine love and respect, both from others and finally for myself. If you have ever been betrayed by someone you trusted completely, know that survival is possible, more than survival thriving. The road is long and often painful, but you are stronger than you know. I would love to hear your stories of resilience in the comments below. Please like this video. If it resonated with you, subscribe to hear more stories of overcoming life's challenges, and share with someone who might need to know they are not alone in their struggle. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, your worth is never determined by someone else's inability to see it.